warm welcome for this wonderful workshop and masterclass learning series 2021, which is presented at this 10th edition of BMO International Film Festival South Asia, Toronto 2021, the largest South Asian film festival in North America. And we are really honored to have Sharmila ji with us. Thank you so much, Sharmila ji, for this wonderful occasion on Satyajit Ray's 100th anniversary. And who better than you, who've been so closely associated with him. I want to jump in and start asking you so many questions, but let me ask you the very first question. How did Satyajit Ray find you and decide to cast you in Apur Sansar?
I haven't the faintest, but thank God he did. There are a lot of conjectures. One is that he had his scouts in front of all the schools where he thought, somebody at the age that he wanted to play Aparna, the character I play, would be. And they found me and somebody followed me home. And that's how it happened. And some say Mr. Ray had a very bad experience because he was shooting a scene earlier in one of his films where there was a wedding scene. And at the very last minute, the fiancé of the woman came and dragged her away because working in films at that time was considered not very good, girls from good families didn't work in films. That's how they perceived the whole thing. So my sister, Tinku, had already worked in a film called Kabuliwala, written by Tagore and directed by Tapun Sinha. So he may have thought that this family won't have any objection if one of their girls act in films. So it could be that. But whatever it was, I'm very grateful that he asked me. He had already advertised in the papers that he was looking for in Bengali, Sushri, meaning attractive young girl, So anyway, one day the phone rang and there was this wonderful voice at the other end. And my father took the call and he asked me, he said, made a proposal for me to be active, be part of this film. And my father, of course, instantly agreed because, our house used to be full of discussions on Rai, that how proud we felt of this director, this new director, who had changed the language of cinema. We were seeing films that we had never seen before. And, it was, so I guess everybody in the house, my family, agreed to it. And there it was, and I was chosen.
But do you remember your first meeting with him?
Yes, of course. He had called me to his house, and I went with my little sister and my mother, and I was wearing a frock, as we called it, those, we didn't, although those days we used to wear a sari at a very young age, but I hadn't reached quite that age. So I was anyway wearing that. And when I entered, before he could even said hello or, anything nice, he said, go quickly and change because you're ruining my image of Aparna. So I was rushed off to another room where his wife, whom we called Munkudi, her name was Vijaya. Anyway, she dressed me up in a sari and she put my hair up in a bun and put a little bindi, how Indian women wear a bindi. So I was dressed up and then I was brought back to the master who instantly said, welcome, Aparna, because I obviously looked the part. And then he asked me a few questions to which I answered. And that was that. I mean, there was no audition as such. He didn't ask me, I thought he might ask me to read something or, ask me to recite a poem perhaps. but nothing like that. He just talked with me for about half an hour about this, that, and the other, the school, and what do I do, and just normal conversation. And he okayed me, and that's how it happened.
Ma'am, how old were you, and how did you prepare for this role?
I was 13 at that time, because the film released when I was 14. As you know, we start working at a certain age, and then post-production, etc., and the film releases. So if you Google it, you'll find that my age is 14 but actually I started working when I was 13. And how did he prepare me? He didn't actually. All of us, he gave his actors a bound script, which was handwritten and with images in the margin, for each frame, the screenplay. So we got that screenplay, which is a wonderful thing to have. But we were strictly told not to memorize any lines. We were told to read it, imbibe it, but not memorize it. So when I went to the set, I hadn't memorized any lines. Not that Manikda was, I will keep calling Satyajit Rai Manikda because that's how we always addressed him. So not that he was very verbose or dialogue dependent, but even then he discouraged us to read the script. Like memorize the dialogues.
So do you have those scripts even now?
I knew that you would ask me. I have, but sadly, sadly not. Only Shinabadhu script I have, and the others I don't have. Very sad. I don't have.
Those are really wonderful pieces of art.
Absolutely. I absolutely understand that. It's a treasure.
It's a treasure.
I've got his letters,
Right.
But the scripts are so unique because of those images.
Yeah.
He used to draw sometimes, and each script was different. Like Aparna's script would have my instructions, whereas Opu's script would have, like Mohan Agashe tells this story that he, they came to work for Sadgati, and it was already a kind of late. Anyway, they had left their script in the room. And Mohan Agashe had his script, but Om Puri didn't have his script. So Manikda said, where's your script? So Om Puri said, I can, share Mohan's script because it's the same thing. And he said, no, go and get your script. So obviously he wrote, I can't imagine how he could do that.
Yeah,
he was so thorough and so hardworking,
I'd just like to add to what you were saying about script, because Andrew Robinson told me that he went to the sets of Shatranj Ke Khiladi, and he had a script for him, what he was shooting. He had handwritten in English so that he could understand the dialogues. So yes. That's precisely that he was so particular, and in one lifetime, ma'am, to be able to do such an incredible amount of work. I don't think so. He did anything but just worked and worked and worked, and he was so passionate.
Absolute passion, because he was, he wasn't really interested in money as such. Yeah. If he had to spend, he would spend it on books, music, or anything to do with cinema. Because when he was asked, because he was a wonderful writer, he was an illustrator, he had a little, he knew enough about music, he could have gone any way,
Yeah,
But when he was asked particularly what he would like to do, he said, I want to make cinema, because I think in our country, not much has happened in this particular field. And that's what he did. And he took cinema to an art form. He brought in a completely new way, from background music to photography to everything, the the way we performed, the language that was used was so bookish earlier. So everything he changed. He used natural sounds like water dripping from a tap or a dog barking in the background. So all that was not seen in India at that time. There was orchestra playing in the background, So he changed all that. So there was a different feel to what he made. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, he's almost perfect, If you really look at cinema, he's almost perfect. But I want to ask you, during the shoot of Apur Sansar, what was your first shot like? How did you recall your very first shot?
I have asked this question very often, and of course, it is very vivid in my memory. And the first scene that he took, and then later he told me once that he liked to do the most difficult scene the very first day. So I don't know if that was a very difficult scene for Aparna or not. But the scene was where Opu and Aparna has already got married and they have come to the city, just the two of them, and they have climbed the steps and they are now waiting in front of his room. The door is closed and there's Opu and Aparna, and Aparna is still in her bridal dress with the Bengali, hairdo and all the things that a Bengali bride wears. And Opu, we are standing behind the door and the camera is inside, the other side, with, Shubroto and Manikda, etc. And then Manikda's voice sort of rings out, start camera, sound, action. And at that point, Apu opens the door, takes a step inside and makes space for me and looks back at me and say, Esho, meaning come. And I very slowly and I don't know, with trepidation or not, it's her expression is not doesn't give anything away. She crosses the threshold. And then I take one step forward, then I look around the room, then I look up, and then while Manikda is sort of telling me what to do, like look right, look left, look up, raise your shoulder a little bit, a sigh, cut, excellent. So that was my first shot. And while we were waiting outside, Shobitra asks me, are you feeling nervous? So I said, no. Why should I feel nervous? Because, when you're young and when you're used to taking orders from your teachers and elders and everything, I actually wasn't. I mean, for me, it was okay. It was just another adventure that I was doing, Or maybe Manikda had this quality to not make you nervous because he wouldn't over-instruct. He wouldn't make it appear as if something major is about to happen. So it was all very natural. So that was my first days, first shot.
And what an amazing, that whole atmosphere which he created. I still remember when you're walking up, the neighbors, the lady swinging herself, the reactions. And what is most beautiful is in the balcony of the Chhatri, which you call, where he would time the smoke of the engines and create that. It's incredible, those little details which you can only see in Manikda's film. And in fact, if anybody has learned, we've all learned from that details. But he created that atmosphere, and to me, that was, I think, one of the most important scenes in the film. And he started you off with that.
The next shot was of my crying. That Shubroto Mitra's beautifully, that the torn curtain.
Yeah.
And, I sort of start crying because I think the travel and the newness of the place is too much for me. So I kind of break down. And then the shot of the eye through the curtain, which everybody went mad about, was again Shubroto Mitra. And then I see the slum, down in the basti, the child and mother, and they're smiling. And then she resolves that she's going to make this happen, she'll be okay. So that was the first days of shooting. And what you were referring to, 30 years later, somebody called Catherine Burge, who was making a documentary on Shomitra, took me back to the same place. And the location hadn't changed one bit. And then I again walked up those steps. And when the door opens, when you get to the top of the terrace, and when you open and you enter the terrace, then there is the open sky. So then I realized that what a wonderful location for a poet, because there was no sound except for the passing trains, which of course, through the trilogy, that was the leitmotif of the films, all the three films.
Right.
So I realized that Manikda, how locations mattered for him. In Jalsha Ghar, the music room, the house is a character. In Nayok, in The Hero, the train is a character. And those characters are minutely worked upon. And his art director, because these three people, the art director, Bongshi Chandragupta, the DOP, Subrata Mitra, and of course, the great Satyajit Ray, the three of them made these films possible. And you cannot put aside Subrata's contribution and Bongshida's contribution. Because the three of them, the way they worked till Charulata and Nayok, I think Nayok probably was their last film, I'm not sure. And then, of course, Manikda went solo, mainly for economic reasons.
And in fact, I was going to ask you about his collaboration with Subrata Mitra. I mean, absolutely fantastic. I mean, you don't get DOPs or cameramen like that, and the way he lit you up, ma'am. And so tell us about their relationship. How would they work out on the set? And what is Manikda like on the set?
Should I talk about Subrata first and come to Manikda after that?
Absolutely.
Subrata, when Pathar Panchali happened, Subrata was just a still photographer. He hadn't handled, he hadn't, a movie camera before that. So Manikda had this absolute trust. And he said, no, you will be able to do it. And of course he did it. And coming back to Opu Sangsar and his lighting, the scene in the Tonga, in that, how would you say it in English, horse carriage, when we've seen a film and we are coming back. And he likes, he puts a cigarette in his mouth and he suddenly remembers, oh my God, I promised my wife I will not smoke, only after meals. So he looks very guilty. And I light the match and I light his cigarette. And with the source of light only being the match light, the image he creates, how I look at that, it's so beautiful. So, I mean, the close-ups, and then the way he lights Opu Sangsar and the way he lights Devi, because it's a dark film, so everything is kind of, the atmosphere is kind of laden with, you can almost sense it. So that's so different. And Charulata again is so beautiful. Like each and every expression in that big close-up of Madhabi's is recorded. And the daylight scenes are so beautiful. And it totally inside. There is, except for the little, going out into their garden, everything else is inside. And of course, the seashore scene.
Right.
And so beautifully lit according to the sun, according to the time of the day. It's, and Nayok, the back projection, from my point of view and from his point of view, he shot those back projections. And again, the day and night inside the closed compartment. I mean, it's fantastic. And when you think of the budget, it was not that he had 15 assistants and so many cameras taking. It was Subroto, hanging out of the train with one hand, maybe somebody else holding him, taking those shots. So, I mean, and then because of the lack of budget, he started improvising. And this bounce light came out of that. And now everybody uses it.
Yeah.
So, they improvised so much because they didn't have the equipment. And if you'd seen the store, if you had seen the floor of the technician studio, full of holes, to make a simple trolley shot a challenge. He worked under those conditions, load shedding, losing a negative in the, your film is in the, being processed, and the electricity goes, and you lose 5 frames or one scene. So you can imagine the stress. But he made films and he competed with the best, Kurosawa, Bergman, and won awards with 1/5 of their budget. I mean, just think of that. So, the contribution of Subroto is immense.
And if you look at the back projections of contemporary films at that time, my God, they look what we were doing in Bombay or what we were doing anywhere else. I mean, yes. Nayak, when I see that,
like you're in a car, you would be shaking yourself that you do. So all kinds.
It almost seemed, ma'am, that you were actually on a train, like how Strangers on a Train of Hitchcock or any of those films were shot. You would feel that it is so seamless, and it's just incredible. But I wanted to ask you, because you worked on 5 films with Manikda, but how was it? I mean, how was he on a set? Because he was so precise on his scripts, and he must have been very precise on his sets, and he never lost his cool. We've heard about that. We've read about that. How's he to work on, and how detailed he was on the set?
He was totally in control of his surroundings, whether it was indoors or outdoors. He was in command. And he never spoke loudly, except to say start sound, etc. And after each shot, he would say cut and excellent. He always, his energy, he energized us. And if he didn't like something that you've done, he would come very close so that nobody else could hear. And being kind of tall and I'm kind of short, and he would come very close to me and make eye contact and say that, can you do this little differently? Perhaps like this. He never over-instructed or never said, oh my God, that was not very good. And can you, or, there was a sense of like you could absolutely trust him, that you knew that he was behind the camera and all was well. He is seeing, and if he says, okay, it is okay. So we just looked at him, and if he said, okay, and that was fine. We never even, couple of times I felt maybe I could have done this, I could have done that. And he could tell that I was about to ask something. He said, no, fine, I'm telling you it's fine. So he was off, during days and nights of the forest. We were not shooting all the time. So we spent quite a lot of time chatting, and as in Bengali, we say adda. And Manikda was lovely. I mean, I never realized that he could whistle so well, and not just any old, like Brahms, Tchaikovsky, all those tunes he could whistle from his memory. And then he would do lots of yoga poses. We would have a little bit of competition between Shobhitro and him and I. And he was a lot of fun. I mean, he would tell us stories, and you felt that he's not missing a trick. No matter what is happening in whichever corner, he is observing that. So I can't tell you, I just felt that he was in total control, and he came to the set totally prepared. totally prepared. And yet he was very flexible. If he felt that the light was going or something unexpected was happening, like leaf falling from the tree or something, he would instantly change the camera angle and try and capture that. So it's not that he was absolutely rigid. He would allow you to improvise and allow you to, to do things a little differently. But he had a plan in mind.
Yeah, it's incredible the way he. Kanchenjunga was shot purely on terms of the weather, and
Yes.
and I cannot believe any other director to do that, because it was a very dialogue-oriented film and very heavy dialogues, and he was able to shoot depending on make changes, and it's not easy for the actors, but he knew he knew it, what he wanted and what point and where the cuts would be. It's just incredible that this man had that talent, which I think, ma'am, no one had.
He observed his actors before he cast them. Casting was very important for him, the
Yes.
look. So he said that he's worked with good amateurs and bad amateurs, and good professionals and bad professionals. But to him, the look was more important. So once he had that look, you didn't really need to act. The way he choreographed the scene, like for instance, let me give you an example. Like in Devi, in that fantastic scene, I think the best scene of that film, where the father-in-law dreams in his sleep that the goddess Kali's face merges into the face of his daughter-in-law, his younger daughter-in-law. And he thinks that she is the goddess incarnate. And he wakes up with this religious fervor, and he starts coming towards her room, and she hears the sound of the khodom, as we call it, the slippers, which are hard slippers, which makes a noise. And he comes and he's saying ma, ma, with that complete devotional sort of way. And she opens the door, like obviously it's something never happened before. Her husband is not there. And he falls at her feet. The head of the house, the patriarch, her father-in-law, falling at her feet and calling her ma, and telling his other son to do the same. So, just imagine how she feels. In fact, I had thought about it. I said, how am I going to do this? Because I have to keep, I have to cover my face, because I can't show my face to my elders. So how am I going to do it? And I can't really go back because there's a wall behind me. So how further back can I go? So should I use my hands? What should I do? So what does he do? He says, no, you just turn your face and make your hand claw the wall, and just scratch, like that with your, and simultaneously your toes sort of curls up, and you're actually receding inside yourself.
Right.
And it's so well expressed through the shot that that how brutalized this woman is. And so it was not really, okay, we did what we had to do, so with the hands and with the feet, but it was all there in his mind. So he had thought about it, that how he's going to convey what she's feeling. This young girl, unlettered girl without her husband, how traumatic this is for her. So all that is conveyed. I think it's a brilliant scene.
Brilliant. And you were just 14, ma'am? You were just 14 years old?
Very next year, after Bhushan, he called me, And all this, of course, was done during my school vacations. So, yes, I was 14.
Yeah. And at age of 14 to do such a dramatic, and it was, I think it's one of his most beautiful films. You know, in fact, I prefer it over Charulata.
Charulata and Devi are my favorite too, and of course Mahanagar for
Right.
different reasons. But Charulata and Devi are absolutely perfect films because he says that he made less mistakes there. I don't know. I can't see. I've seen it over and over again, both the films, and I find them, and yet they're so different.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
different. Charu is like a prisoner. You know, she's the entire life she's inside the house. Only twice she goes out of that area. Once she goes to the seashore with her husband, and once she's in her own garden. So that's her freedom. Otherwise, she's within these four walls doing either making a handkerchief or stitching a slipper or and yet she has so much potential and so much passion and so much emotion. And there's that wonderful scene when Bhupesh comes to collect a book and she's standing at the doorway and he goes back without even registering that she's standing there. And yet she's doing everything that she possibly can. And she wants to have conversation with Bhupesh because she's read Bankim and for him, other writers. And for him, they're just novels because he's more interested in politics. And although he loves her, he's the one who tells Amol that take care of her because I sense that she can write. And why don't you give her company? And in that process, she falls in love with Amol. And to the point where when Bhupesh is late, she doesn't even think of that. She's not thinking of husband at all. She's only thinking of her Amol and please don't go away. I mean, I don't want to lose you. So it's a kind of madness, really. So I think it's so different from Devi. And yet there are two women. One is dealing with her own emotions, which she had never experienced before, awakening of passion. And she's not apologetic about it, you know. Whereas in Devi, a little young village girl, unlettered, away from her own home, husband is away from her. She believes that the patriarch of the family can do no wrong because he's so learned. And she has no will. She has no way. She doesn't know how to preserve herself. Because how can my father in law be wrong? Even when she's given an opportunity to run away, because they can't stand up to him. So they have to run away. And she cannot run away because she says, suppose something terrible happens to you, because she prioritizes her family over herself, because that's what she's been taught. So she's just a prey of this entire setup, this dogmatic, uh, superstitious, patriarchal setup, which it's somebody's whim actually, and a little boy dies in the process.
Yeah.
Because so it's so, and that those close-ups haunt you much after the film is over. And there, I think, when you're saying challenging or acting, that towards the end, when I've lost my mind, so to speak, after the little boy dies, and husband has come back again, and she's in her bridal outfit and wearing all those clothes. And again, it's Bongshida and Shubroto that they create that atmosphere, and
Wonderful.
the audio, the sounds of the jewelry tinkling and making that kind of noise, her bangles, and then her face is smudged with coal, you know, eye makeup is smudged, and those wild look of her. And she just breaks down and she says, you know, they have killed Kokon, the little boy. And she's incoherent, really. And then there was a debate how to end the film, like in Charulata. Manida wasn't quite sure how to end Charulata, nor was he sure about how to end Devi, whether to kill her or whether to, So the end is ambiguous. She just runs away to freedom or to it's just very, very sad film. I mean, it just makes me feel that how even now, in the name of honor, justice, family, women continue to suffer injustice, at least in India. They're not educated, they're not fed properly.
So in Devi, of course, you had the great Chhabi Biswas, the doyen of Bengali theatre and cinema. But what is it to work with Soumitra Chatterjee, whom you started your career with in Apur Sansar, and then to work with somebody like Chhabi Biswas? How was it to work when you were just 14 and 13?
Both were very good to me. Chobida was known for his little temperamental, because he was a veteran and a senior. But I think I was too young, so he was very good to me. So I had no problem with him at all. And I think he was totally immersed in his character also. I don't think he had any time to, look at me or say anything, because he was constantly, he lived his character. I think in that film, all of us just lived our characters. There was not much chatting on the set. In fact, nobody spoke to me. I felt isolated. Whereas in Opus Shankshar, I would go and sit in the sound van, and, everybody was older than I, and they all treated me like a child, and I would move around. But in Devi, I was not allowed to. So, there was that. And Soumitra, of course, we became friends. He was exactly 10 years older than I. And he was very good to me and like a friend. I would call him Bondhu, my friend, because I could talk to him about anything. And he was so committed already because he came from a theatre background. He had worked with Shishir Bhaduri, and he was working now. And then he was writing poetry, and he was very interested in literature. So there was so much to learn from him, really. So while he talked, I listened, and he was also very fond of sports. I mean, in Bengal, everybody is cricket mad. So was he. And so our friendship really continued till the last. And we had, he had so much to say, from politics to sports to theatre to even painting. He started painting towards the end. There are lots of poetry that he has written. He was a wonderful reciter. So I really miss him because he was such a good friend. And, I could learn so much from him, even now.
I wanted to talk, you spoke a little bit about the atmosphere of creating a set on Nayak. But where was the set made? Because it was so beautifully done, and what a wonderful atmosphere Bansi Chandragupta created. So if you could talk to us about the shooting of Nayak, and I loved your character also, glasses, and was it something which Ray already had in mind, or did you work on that character? So if you can talk a little bit both about the film and your character.
He told me when I went to see him, when I got the script and when I met him in his house, he told me that I have to wear glasses. So I said, yes. Why? So he said, no, you look too young opposite Uttam Kumar. I don't think that was, but he wanted me to look different, I think. So I asked him, am I short-sighted or am I long-sighted? So he got very puzzled over that question. He was not prepared for it at all. He said, you choose whatever you are, whatever you want to be. And the entire film was shot indoor. the compartments were made inside. So it was all indoor. It was not in the moving train at all. At least my part. I don't
Right.
know, because the other places where I was not, except for the train, the final scene where I get off the train and he's surrounded by his fans, and I just walk away with whoever's come to receive me without even a backward glance. And he's looking out for me. I thought that was a lovely ending. But other than that, everything was shot indoors. And it was I like, it's one of my favorite films because it's again, because we are actors and we are judged by our audience from whatever is written about us, people believe. I mean, there is a kind of a split emotions. In one hand, they adore and, you know, they love us intensely. But the moment they hear something bad about us, they are very quick to believe it. So really, there is, it's, I don't know, it's like a mirage, really, this fans. Uh, so this is what the actor is going through. He's on a trip of introspection and he's looking back at his life. And there are only two characters in the train. There is this little non-Bengali young girl and I, who's not really affected by his stardom. Nobody else can be at ease. Either they are, you know, looking down on him and just feeling, oh my God, you know, he's such a drunkard, or he's, you know, they have an opinion about him, a negative opinion. And the others are, of course, adoring. You know, there's that little young girl on the bunk bed and he is smoking and this cigarette is going towards her and she's loving it, you know. So there is, everybody has their own life and he brings quite a few people together, and this is an original script, Manida's own script, and they all come together and this, he sets them up and then we don't really know how their story ends. And as far as Arindam and Aditi is concerned, uh, I think it's very lovely because she goes there as a challenge. She says, let me, you know, let's see, because we are here now stuck for so many hours. So let me go and talk to him. And if he gives an interview, it'll be great. And she introduces herself as a editor of a woman's magazine. And he's a little, um, what's the word? You know, puts her down a little bit. And she holds her ground. So that's how it starts, you know. So there's sort of posturing, so to speak. And then slowly he starts talking to her and, in fact, says everything about himself. And she begins to realize that there is, after all, a man of, you know, a real man of flesh and blood underneath all this. And at the last scene, he sends for me. He tells the guy that go and get this woman, you know, who's got a pen in her blouse and, you know, describes. And he's quite drunk. And he's got the door open and the train, you know, you know, he sees all those images. Anyway, I arrive and then he's in that inebriated condition. He's talking to me. And I can see, I hear. And that scene, Uttam Kumar did. And then Manikda just said, you know, he talked. I mean, he said the same dialogues as Uttam was saying. He just showed him how to do it. Actually, not showed him how to do it, he just did it, you know. And Uttam did about, since I was a spectator, I was just standing there, my back to camera, I could see that Uttam could do only about 70% of that, if that. And yet he was so good. So you can imagine how good Manikda was. You know, how the breaking of the sentences and how to, you know, modulating with his voice. And it was just brilliant. I mean, I'm so glad that I was privy to that, because that's the one thing that he didn't do, was to act in his own films. But that happened. And then the next day, when they meet in the dining car, she tears up the interview. And he asks her that, how are you going to write? Are you going to write from your memory? In Bengali, it sounds so much better. Mon theke likhben. And she said, no, mone rekhe debo. So Manikda's, actually, his dialogues were so beautiful. It was pleasure to speak them, because the moan and moan in a different way he uses. That, so are you going to write from memory? And she says, no, I will keep it in my memory, or I'll keep it in my heart. And it says it all. So the first time she takes her glasses off, and he says, you know, you look so lovely without glasses. So it's her realization that, you know, we make such hasty, you know, conclusions, you know, judgment about people we don't even know. And we sort of say disparaging things about them. And they are actually human beings, and they have lived their life, and they are trying. And so that awareness is created in her. And he realizes also, of course, it's a great relief for him to open his heart out to somebody who's not going to make it into a scoop, or who's somebody he doesn't know at all and perhaps will never meet. So it's just the construction of the film is so lovely that, you know, you are together intensely for a few hours, and then you're, you know, then you go away, each to their own destination. So I think it's really beautiful. And the compartments were made indoor by Bongshi Chandragupta to the exact detail of the Rajdhani Express. Like, you couldn't fault it at all. And again, with that budget constraint. So
he was incredible. One of the best art directors, I think.
Absolutely. In Opu Shangshar, he was waiting. And in fact, Manikda, you know, time was money. He was delaying him because he was waiting for an umbrella with a hole in it, which he wanted to put in the foreground when Opu is looking for jobs. And these three people are playing chess. And he says, intermediate. I mean, you're too overqualified for this job. So we don't really want you to, you know. So he goes away. So, but he was waiting for that umbrella to arrive to create that foreground. So he, you know, from the room of Opu, from the room of Arindam, you could see, like, Arindam has a overseas British Airways bag. It was called BOAC then. And then he's got an electric shaver, Philips. So you could see his affluence. And in his room, he's got big pictures of himself. So, you know, he's an actor. So you get an idea of the man from the house. I mean, I'm talking about that time. That time, nobody did that, you know. Yeah. So he read the script and he did what the character, I mean, you could imagine, yes, this person would live in this kind of house.
But it was so natural. And in fact, ma'am, we've gone the other extreme today. We overdo it. Those start looking unrealistic, you know, we start putting it. But they were so perfect in their way of putting things. I wanted to ask you, how was it to work with Uttam Kumar? I still remember that one scene when you go to take the autograph in Nayak, and the pen, the ink pen, he's about to write, the ink is not coming out. So he sort of tries with his hand, he does this, then he dips it in the water and he signs it. I mean, things like, you know, I found it so
natural. That actually was not meant to happen. He did it. So he was kind of a wonderful actor. So he did that scene. He improvised that scene.
But
And
how
also,
was it to work with him?
it was wonderful because I had worked with him, because by Nayok, I was a professional actor. I was already working in Hindi films. And I had worked my first Bengali film professionally, because Opushangshar and Debi, I wasn't paid and I was not, I mean, I didn't consider myself a professional actor. But in Sheshanko, I had worked with him. So I wasn't intimidated by him or anything like that. And he was, again, Manika said everybody is equal. So it was really wonderful. And I thought he acted very well. And I was in Interlaken shooting for Evening in Paris when in Berlin, the film was shown. And Manikda called me and said, please come. And from Interlaken to Berlin is no distance at all. But it was difficult, because of Shamizi's dates and all that. And I just couldn't go. And I really regret that, because it would have been wonderful to go to a film festival with Satyajit Ray and Uttam Kumar, and with such a film like Nayak.
Right. Yeah. I want to talk about Arvind Ratri Man. And
Yes.
one of my favorite films. And of course, everybody must have spoken to you about The Memory Game,
Yes.
the way Ray shot it. Tell us about The Memory Game and the film, and how was it?
When we read this scene and when we went to shoot it, even after shooting it, we had no idea that it's going to become such an iconic scene. And it was very hot in Chipadohar. It was middle of this Palamo forest. And the early morning and late evenings we could shoot. The rest of the day was so hot that we really couldn't shoot. So we got to the location, say around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we had to finish the scene that day. And if my memory serves me correctly, we did it. We did finish that scene. And in that, it's a simple game where all of us sit around, the 4 friends and Joya, my sister-in-law, and I, and we are playing this game where everybody says a name of a very well-known person. And after the first round, you recall all those names and then add one of your own. And so the game proceeds. And I explain the game to everybody else, and they all sort of understands, and then we start playing the game. And through that, something so ordinary becomes extraordinary in his hands. Everybody's character, everybody's personality is revealed through the game. How Shekhar, who's sitting next to me, he picks up the dark glasses and puts it on and says, Atulya Ghosh, because the politician, there was a politician who wore dark glasses in Bengal at that time by that name. And he improvised that because my dark glasses happened to be there. He just picked it up. Next to him was Hari. And Hari is, he finds all these games are very intellectual. So he doesn't want to play. And when they mock him by saying, is it Helen of Troy or Helen of Bombay? He says, no, I've had enough. I don't want to play. And he gets up. And then Oshim is getting tenser by the moment because he wants to win. He wants to win at any cost. He cannot even think of losing to a woman, And then Joya and Shubhendu, Shanjoy, I think is called, they are having a little interlude, a chat amongst themselves because they'd already lost out. And at one point, he goes and gets a pillow for Joya so that she's comfortable. And there are lots of flies, and Joya is sort of going like that. And before Shubhendu comes back, he looks at the mirror and, does up his face a little bit and comes back. So much is said and shown about each character, who they are, through the scene. And I, of course, realize, because at one point, Shoumitro Oshim sort of screams at Shekhar, shut up, because he starts singing and he says, you're distracting me. So she realizes how tense he is. And she says, well, I don't think I can't remember. And Joya is absolutely astonished and saying, you can't remember? And she says, yes, I've forgotten. And Oshim Babu wins. And then the Santal drums at the background at that point. So, the whole scene, and Manikda operated the camera for the first time. And it was an Ariflex. And Ariflex was on a trolley. So for a tall man, and he was looking through, because Ariflex, there are shutters, it is very difficult to look through the viewfinder and see exactly what's happening, the frame. But he got, he could, there were close-ups taken separately, but some shots were trolling back and then moving to my face and moving to Oshim's face while we are speaking. And the frame was perfect. Like he was doing it almost blindly. It was so good. And again, as I said, we couldn't afford, maybe maximum 2 takes, but not 3. And he did it so well. And we did overshoot, and Shivendra was getting very fed up, and he was looking at, the light and said, of course, this film will win an award somewhere, but look at the light, and I have to shoot in this light. But we finished by 6 o'clock. And it's such a beautiful scene. And so much is said without saying anything, if you know what I mean.
Yes, absolutely.
It's so that Manikda could really liberate a scene from dialogues, He didn't have to say much. The way he shot a scene, you understood what was happening, what was the undercurrent that was there, without making it, without speaking about it or without underlining it. So he was a master in that.
I wanted to ask you, is there any one film or one character which you didn't do, which you think he should have offered you?
All the characters. No, I was offered Kanchenjunga. I couldn't do it because I had my school exams, final exams. So I really couldn't. And that's a great regret. I would have loved to have done Mahanagar. And of course, Charulata. Ashwini Shanket also, there was a dialogue that I could be there. But then it became a collaboration between Bangladesh and India. So that's why I wasn't there. But he gave me the script for Ashwini Shanket. And look at Ashwini Shanket, if I may say.
Yes.
Like, look at the distant thunder and what the time that we are going through now, COVID, and the kind of situation. Don't you find a kind of similarity? How this man-made famine affects this remote village in Bengal. And suddenly there is a grain shortage. Right. And suddenly he's not so interested in the events, but how the moral compass of the society starts changing. There are looting, and some are becoming better than themselves and some are not. So I find there's so much similarity between our situation right now and what he saw and what he brought through that distant thunder. So yeah, coming back to Mahanagar, I thought it was a wonderful film because the way, for any woman, it would be a perfect film to play, because that was, those days women didn't go out to work. And when Madhavi is forced to work because the husband doesn't have a job, or his job is salary is not enough for family, because those days everybody stayed together. There was two parents, mother and father and sister and a son. So all of them in a small place. So her and the husband encourages her to go to work. And first she's so diffident, and she goes and she learns, and first time she's a saleswoman and she goes to somebody's house and she runs away, because the moment a man opens the door, she runs away. And slowly she starts gaining confidence and she becomes very good at her job. And the man starts getting somewhat, I don't know if jealous is the right word, but starts resenting her independence, and says, please resign. And then she actually writes that resignation letter, and she's about to go while he calls, because he loses his job. Whatever job he had, he's lost it because the bank goes bust. So he quickly calls her and says, don't resign. But she picks up because the boss has sacked another unjustly, has terminated her friend's job, because he feels the Anglo-Indians are slightly looked down upon, and he feels that she was lying about her health, which was not true. She was actually not well. And she has now, her walk has changed. When she's crossing the road, she has a tea with a friend, a colleague. So her whole body language has changed now that she's working. And then when she speaks up for this woman, she said, no, you can't do this. This is wrong. She wasn't lying. I've been to the house and she was not well. And the boss doesn't listen to her, and of course threatens her with consequence, and she doesn't care. And she throws that letter and she says, okay, in that case, I'm leaving. And all this confidence has come from where? Because she's now used to going out, used to meeting people. And then she comes down, and then she's sort of almost in tears because the husband has come to meet her. And she says, you must be very angry with me. And then when he gets to know, he says, no, I support you. You've done the right thing. And now both of them don't have a job. And then she looks up and she says, look at this, big city and so many offices and so many jobs. And I'm sure one of us will get a job. One of us will get a job. So either you or I, we can work and we can together support the family. So it's no longer that I will be the breadwinner and you will be the housekeeper. So the parity now is clear. And sort of they walk together, and her walk is so confident now. If you just see that walk, it's no longer the walk of before. And they, on that hopeful note, knowing that they don't have a job, and yet they're happy and they accept, and they, on that resolve, the film ends. So it's so beautiful. And so, there are little scenes, and again, intergenerational differences. So that is a magnificent film and this predates the women's movement. At that time, there's all these feminism and all these Me Too, or nothing was there. And yet that film says everything. It touches on all those subjects, all those points. So I think it's a fantastic film.
But what is incredible, ma'am, that these are films which you have not worked on, and still you're so passionate and
because there is so much to learn from his films,
Absolutely.
Yes, I'm very fortunate that I could work with him. I've talked with him. I remember him sitting in that chair of his, that iconic image. with surrounded by paintbrushes and books, and you immediately know this is a man of ideas. You know, there's a piano in the corner, and if you got there and rang the bell, he would open the door for you. If you called, it would be his voice that would answer on the other side. And he was very fond of me. And last time I met him, I'd gone to interview him for Eyewitness. And that my profile picture is now from that interview, Manikda and I. And it happened to be my birthday also. So after the interview, Monkudi had organized a cake and they sang happy birthday. And then after that, I was in touch, but not so much. And very soon he passed away. And at that time, San Francisco was honoring him with the Lifetime Achievement Award. And they had asked me to represent him and, sort of take the award on his behalf. And because it was too late to cancel. So I went, and it was quite an emotional experience and I thought, Manikda, if Manikda could see that I am representing him and, talking about him, how he would feel, that little girl from Opushangsha. So it is not, it's a treasure trove. Like when we see his films, we feel, you feel better and you feel so good because there is this universal hope. It doesn't put you in severe depression. You feel that, it's long after the film is over, you're filled with this hope. But unfortunately, after the trilogy, the Calcutta trilogy of Adversary and Company Limited, Shima Badho and John Arunne.
Yeah.
After that, I think he started changing. And he kind of was disillusioned a little bit.
But even the Calcutta trilogy is a bit different to his cinema beforehand. It was changing. It was, your character, the way he shot the films, the way he looked at it. But ma'am, I want to ask you the last question because we've had this most wonderful session and such a relaxed session on a great master, and in fact, someone is unbelievable that a man like this, a Renaissance man like this, could live in a time where we were all very fortunate to have learned. He gives you hope to make films, and you still want to make films like him. And he's someone from India, and people, I often deal with many of the negatives and many of those material which he worked on, and it's astonishing the labs he worked on. When you talk about the other great masters like Fellini or I'm trying to find negatives lying here or there, or they're not in great condition. But look at through that, the imagery which he's able to project, and what Subrata did with absolute, the minimalistic way of, and that is where the true artist lives. It lives, and that defies that no technology can.
It's not a budget that defines the quality of the film. It's your intuition, it's your imagination, it's your thinking. That really makes the film, really. And of course, the budget helps, and all these props helps. But even without that, if you have the idea, and if you have that thinking that Satyajit Ray had, and that kind of dedication, and also he was a kind of a science, as while he was growing up in the printing press, he had lots of curiosity about his books.
Incredible.
His stories are a lot of scientific knowledge is there. So I think he he would improvise and he would work out how best to create, how to get over that lack that he had, you know. So
And look at the range he did, the number of books, running his own magazines of his grandfather. Then, I mean, it's writing scripts, making films. I mean, in one lifetime, he didn't live for 100 years. He was just in his 70s when he passed away.
48 hours a day or something like that. Yeah.
It's just incredible. I would just like to ask you, as we want to end this beautiful conversation, is how would you like to remember him today, you know, when you think of him?
I think I answered that, because when I said, I really cannot imagine my life without Manikda. If Opur Sangsar hadn't happened to me, I don't know where I would be. So today, I'm so grateful that he came in my life and he introduced me to this world of cinema. He taught me how to look at cinema. He taught me the importance of the moment. Everything, the sound, and to be observant, to look at life, to have that, and we tried to imbibe him in many ways, not him as a person, but the values that he represented. And even now, I mean, it sounds, but I would rather work in a good film than a film that pays me lots of money. So I think all our values have come from him. And he led by example, so to speak. And by seeing him, we learned a lot. And his humor, he loved to gossip, and he never really all this talent he wore very lightly. I never heard him talking about himself and I did this and I did that. But he was a very avid listener. And he would ask me about everything and what I did, and, so there is so much. And like I said, why did he choose that scene, that particular scene, my very first day's shot? Why did he choose it? Was it because my condition and Aparna's condition was exactly the same? Was it because that I didn't know what life was or would be for me once I crossed that threshold? Because my life did change after I crossed that threshold. Because then cinema became my life. So when I think of that symbolism, and I want to ask him that, was it deliberate? Is that why you kept that shot? But so that, I was so young at that time that those questions never came to my mind, because I was so busy just living and having fun. But when I really wanted, like for instance, in like when Amol enters Charu's life, there is this rain and thunder and strong wind. When Tutul comes to that house in Shimabadho, the curtains are billowing. And then after that party scene, Tutul keeps the door open. Now, I've seen the film so many times, but I never really saw that she had left the door open. So every time you see his film, you notice something different, something that you had missed earlier. So I think his films will live on forever because it is still open to it remains relevant and open to contemporary reading. So 6 generations removed sees his films and find that it's still relevant. It speaks to them. The Romance of Opur Sangsar, for instance, will not fade. And I've seen all these films with today's generation. And in Orane Din Ratri, every time Robida appears on the scene, the hall bursts out laughing, the entire hall. So there are like I said, the distant thunder it sort of reminds me of today, that how one's behavior changes. So whatever he did then is classic. Like, it's not only for that. It's recorded history, of course. He spoke of the time that he lived in. He made films for that time. But the values, because he went beyond that. And that is why it has got such a long shelf life. It continues to move us. It continues to speak to us. That's how I see his films. Because it's gone, it was made for that time, but it remains timeless.
Yeah, it's very contemporary. Thank you very much, ma'am. It's been wonderful talking to you, and as always, I'm very honored and grateful that you took out the time to talk about a great master. Thank you very much.